I go,
Just
In
why?
surgery
no one in surgery can be OCD.
cannot be
Yeah.
OCD.
So
know.
nobody can't be. He's saying nobody cannot be.
Everybody
Everyone
should be
has
OCD.
Oh, that's not what it made it sound like today.
Yeah.
Okay, no. Everybody in the surgery should
Be a little
must be
OCD.
not
Oh,
a little,
okay.
a lot OCD.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. This is Essence of History. Today we're going to be talking about the history of cannabis. My name is Amanda Armagost.
My name is Alyssa Haber.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence.
Welcome.
What are we talking about
The
today?
history of cannabis. Are you so high you already forgot?
Just recently, we had a bill passed in Minnesota
Yes.
that now recreational cannabis is going to be legal.
Yeah, and actually they're doing it way differently than the other states did it. They're not taxing it as high, and you get to have a larger amount they're doing it at a faster rate. So when California and Oregon first did it, they did it slower, slow progressions of legalization where we're just kind of going crazy. In September of last year, we legalized it for drinks and edibles. And that was a sneak, like we snuck it in on a different bill. So now we just officially passed it, legalized in August.
So a few years ago, actually, we started in Minnesota, the medical cannabis, legalized that, and I've been prescribing that. And I can tell you, it has made a huge difference in the life of many of my patients. And it's surprisingly for people who don't know about that most of doctors, they rather prescribe cannabis to the patient than narcotic. The results are out there, you know. Alyssa, do you know of anybody, how many people in the last 10 years have died of cannabis alone, overdose of cannabis alone?
I don't know of any that directly from just the ingestion of cannabis.
Zero.
Mhm.
Zero. No, some people get cannabis and then cocaine and then heroin and other things, alcohol and so on. So, but directly attributed to cannabis, death directly attributed to cannabis has been zero. So it is I mean, everything, you can't even die of too much water, but short of that, it's quite safe. Medication, plants, and so on and so forth. And that comes from somebody who has never in my life taken cannabis, but you know, it has been very loaded. Cannabis has been very loaded.
It's a very loaded topic, a lot of emotions.
Why?
I think, well, I actually just made a post about this on my Nextdoor app because I was curious too. Why do so many people care? And I heard it's because of the 60s with marijuana madness. What I heard is that right when paper was starting to be able to be made out of trees, we also were able to make paper out of hemp. And we were able to make other things out of hemp, like clothes that lasted longer than cotton for, I think, about the same price or maybe a little bit cheaper to be made. And I think that what I've heard, I know that we'll get the truth in a little bit, but I've heard that there were lobbyists that didn't want their own businesses to be interfered with, shut down, go out of business. So they actually terrorized the cannabis industry and changed cannabis to marijuana name to make it sound more Mexican sounding or
True.
you know, different sounding.
That happened 120 years ago, not 60 years ago.
No, I thought it was
There was another wave of cannabis in the 60s. You're not wrong. I mean, before you go on to it, I just know from my straight thing, there's just a stigma. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You know, anything that can alter someone's mood that has a law against it, that's enough to create, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's illegal.
And
I'm not going to be too biased in one way or another, but you know, from family members, anything that is illegal is set in place because it is bad for you. That is what,
like
that,
alcohol.
that
like
is what's
alcohol.
legal. That is, but that you have to understand the mentality. You
Mhm.
know, if it is illegal, nobody should be doing it. If you
Yeah.
can be jailed for it, then clearly there is something wrong with it.
Mhm.
And that is the mentality.
I've had that perspective before on marijuana, actually, when I was younger.
Yeah, well, it was a time we didn't have any of these laws, right? We didn't have law against heroin or
Mm-mm.
morphine or cocaine and so on. As a matter of fact, they put cocaine in our drinks 120 years ago.
Yep.
And that was all legal and so on. But eventually we start making something legal, something illegal and so on. But what is the most dangerous drug in the whole planet?
The most dangerous in regards
Alcohol?
to,
Yes, more people die of alcohol than almost, well, if you consider the cancer, the consequence, immediate effect, alcohol kills more people than anything else. But if you consider the consequence of that, smoking kills.
So cigarettes, okay.
Cigarettes and so on, but both of them are illegal.
Mhm.
Have been always legal.
Don't
And-
say always.
Well, they have the short episode of prohibition and so, but that was a short-lived thing and so, but they have been always legal.
Right.
And they will be always legal. And you can be a drunk and a chain smoker without the stigma of, well, if you just smoke a
yeah.
cannabis,
Anything.
weed and so on. By the way, the name weed, why is it called weed?
Because it grows so rapidly and kind of randomly in the South.
That's exactly the point. It is actually a weed. People just, people just would, like lots of blacks, lots of Mexican, they would just go around the corner, pick it up, roll it, smoke it, and didn't have to go and buy it from a white people.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to go and pay tax for that. And that wasn't liked by many people. If you are going to have a drug, we want it to be something that we sell and we tax.
Yeah.
We control, micromanage.
Exactly.
So it was a campaign in 19, I believe, 10s and 20s and so on, that it was that a drug of wild, crazy Mexican and blacks. So they went and in the whole South start burning the weed. There's a reason it's called, it was everywhere. They went with flamethrowers. There are lots of, in the First World War, we built a lot of flamethrowers. As a matter of fact, that was one of our choice of weapon. We loved that, to go to the bunkers and burn everybody. There were lots of that. In South, they put it to good use. They went around the country. That was madness, to burn the weed out. So the black and the Hispanic cannot go and just go around the corner, roll it up, and without
Just like
paying
what we
tax.
did with foraging, we made it illegal so we could benefit from it.
Whatever the background of that
We've
is,
been doing that with things for
yeah.
years. We
Yeah.
used to do that with the buffalo for the Native Americans too.
And the stigma came from that. The drug of the white man was legal. The drug of Latino and the blacks, they made illegal. And
Mhm.
stigma that came to that, that is a doorway to harder drugs.
They call it a
Every
gateway drug.
Yeah.
That's what it's
Every
called.
study refuted that. Every single study showed that is not. As a matter of fact, alcohol and tobacco are more gateway drug than cannabis, and yet the stigma stick. The stigma they cause that, that if you smoke, you're a pothead, you're not reliable, and so on and so forth. And all of that, I just put a TikTok out there. I'm not sure if you saw that TikTok, the monkey business.
Oh, yeah, I
I
did.
saw, yeah.
So this is an actual study that I want to say why that stigma stuck and still ongoing in some crisis, in some head of some people. For people who don't know, lots of psychological studies that we have done, it has been on primates,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and because we cannot do it on people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ethically, we
Yeah.
can't.
Well, and many of
True.
those we cannot do it right now with primates either. That would be unhuman. But it was a time that we could do that. They did put 5 monkey in a cage. They put a ladder and they put a banana on a ladder. And what does the monkey do?
Climbs the ladder.
To get the banana. And then if they do that, they would cold spray all the other monkeys. So when repeatedly that happened, every time somebody would go up and otherwise other guys would get sprayed and tortured, the person who did that got beaten up really bad. After a few beatings, everybody stopped doing that. Okay, it's banana, but it's not worth to get beaten.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it was interesting that first of all, even after they stopped spraying people, the monkey who went up still got beaten. So you remove the reason for that action, still got beaten. But then they replaced one at a time. So they take one monkey out, put a new monkey in. Like imagine in a society, somebody dies, new person joins the society. The new person obviously went up and down and got the beating. And after a while, obviously didn't do that. But the new person was even more eager to beat the next monkey once they switch one by one. Even after a generation, after a long time, there is no beating anymore. That behavior was still with them. So successfully in 1920s and 30s, they made that cannabis is a horrible thing. It's going to drive you crazy. And people who do that are the lowest of the lowest of the lowest. And we just took it from generation to generation, stuck with it. And we have to overcome that 120 years later, which I think we are. I mean, nobody really considered somebody who take cannabis.
I disagree.
Yeah, we're not there.
We are
No,
not there
we're
yet?
not close,
Yeah?
actually.
Tell us about it.
Okay, well, so I live in a nicer neighborhood. It's called Minnetonka. And obviously the people there, a lot of them, the age is a little bit higher. So right now with the legalization on my Nextdoor app, everyone is going crazy because they're saying adding marijuana to the mix is going to have more intoxicated people, more intoxicated drivers, and they actually believe that it's going to kind of make people go down in quality. If I told my dad that I was happy that marijuana was legalized, he would be so pissed.
My mom would,
yeah.
you know that.
Our parents, even your dad would,
Yeah.
both of our parents,
my
my
dad,
mom
my
is
mom.
cool with it. My mom
Well,
understands.
your
but-
work daddy would be okay with that.
So I don't think we're there yet. I think our generation is definitely
I'll
there.
tell you from school side of things, I just graduated PA school about almost a year ago. And we were having this debate, the talk of, just medical marijuana even. A lot of their arguments for medical marijuana was the fact that you are able to smoke marijuana, meaning that you'd be getting kind of the same toxins that you would as if you were smoking anything into your lungs. The argument we have is there's several ways to ingest THC, without having to smoke gummies, foods, anything. But that wasn't enough to kind of get over the idea of marijuana must be smoked. Marijuana is going to cause lung cancer, diseases, all these same things, which is valid if you're going to put stuff into your body through smoking, inhalation.
From any kind of organic burn.
Exactly.
You don't need to smoke
but you don't have to smoke marijuana.
do drops. You can even do topicals.
Yeah.
And as well,
exactly.
no,
Eat it, drink it.
Yeah.
Thousands of years in Middle East, people have been using tobacco, but they're using these so-called water pipes.
Yeah, that clarifies it a little bit.
Well, what it does, it takes the tars away, that it reduces, never to zero, but like 90%, I'm just throwing out that number, don't quote me on that, but it takes most of that material to make that tar in your lung, take it all away. And the proof of that is you'd use that and you look at the water, so wow, that all should have been in my.
It's nasty. Yeah.
But see, the marijuana, people who have been using marijuana, that bong and so on, water pipe and so on, has been as well used a lot.
Yeah,
them
that's
as well.
true. And also when you're smoking weed a lot or marijuana, a lot of times you don't use tobacco, you use hemp.
Yeah, but
And so
No, the tar comes from any organic burn. It doesn't
Right.
matter what that is.
But what I'm saying is you're not ingesting tobacco.
Right,
It's
per se.
yeah, it's
yeah.
hemp. And so also I think the argument of you shouldn't smoke marijuana because
Shouldn't
it's
smoke
bad,
anything
it's bad
is
for
what
you, it's
the-
kind of
yeah.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
Because then we need to stop doing a lot of stuff.
So
Well, I think most
If-
medical providers would agree anything that you smoke
Yeah.
probably should be stopped.
Right,
Yeah,
but if
yeah.
you want to say it's bad for you, okay, go to Target. What is the
Right.
first aisle you see? It's the candy aisle. So
so, but this episode is about the history
yeah, the history.
of cannabis. So, yeah, which of you know the origin of the word assassin?
Assassin?
Yeah,
I know the origin.
you have talked about
Yeah.
that. Oh,
Oh, shoot,
So
that's
then
not
you-
fair. I
yeah.
don't know.
yeah. So,
I think you were here when we talked about it. It'll ring a bell when he starts.
So-
Go ahead.
tell me, what is the word assassin actually means?
Someone that kills someone?
Professionally,
Okay,
a professional killer.
yes,
Okay.
duh.
Yeah, it's not a just random killer. It's
I know.
somebody who's professionally, his job is that.
A trained
Yeah.
assassin.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Well, I think the word assassin implies trained
Okay.
and professional. What if I tell you that the word comes from a castle or a place just about 70 miles north of where I was born?
I,
What would-
what would I say? I would say, wow, I'm not entirely surprised.
So
Apples.
Apples
Don't
don't fall far from the tree.
about a little around 1,000 years ago, maybe a little less than that, but there were this very fanatic group of people, and they were in the castle. Most of them, their headquarters, their flagship was in a castle called Alamut, about 70 miles north of where I was born in Iran. What was special about them, their leader was a very charismatic person.
Okay,
Okay. And
Nice.
then,
From your area too?
yeah,
yeah.
they were not a high number of people. They were like, yeah, like maybe in thousands maximum, if any, maybe hundreds. But they alone, they changed the history of the Middle East and the entire politic of the Middle East for 100 years to come. You know how they did that?
By killing people professionally.
By training people who wouldn't care if they get killed. By training, then they would take the young, impressionable people, young men, they bring them to this castle, and then they would indoctrinate them.
Brainwash.
Yeah, indoctrinate them. Part of that was
Brainwash.
smoking hashish.
Indoctrine. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, they would smoke hashish, they would put them in a trance, and then when they become impressionable, they would brainwash them, indoctrinate them.
Weren't they doing mushrooms too?
I don't know what but I
I
know they
think they're
were.
doing psychedelics
Well, they,
and marijuana.
yeah, well, I know about the
Psychedelics
hashish.
are still
They-
technically natural too. so-
Yeah.
True.
They used hashish, they would get in trance, they would get indoctrinated, and then they would go and not caring about their own life, kill a head of a state or important people. They're, and it's very
Mission
important.
complete. Life.
You
goal.
change the head of a country, you change a governor, you kill a general, the whole
Mhm.
path of the history would change. So this small group of people changed the entire history of the Middle East in a very, very significant way. And
Hmm.
these people, they were crazed, right? Or at least they are perceived then crazed. And even now, anybody who would commit suicide, terrorists and so on, they're considered crazy people.
Mhm.
But people would call them these crazy people who smoke hashish. Hashashin.
Yeah.
You see, the hashashin came to Latin, became assassin,
Mm.
and you're welcome. We gave you a
You're
word.
welcome.
We gave you a
That,
word.
that didn't ring a bell, so I learned something
Okay.
new.
Yeah,
Maybe
hashashin.
Maybe I learned
Assassin.
on my other podcast.
Hmm.
Because I have
Especially, in many languages, H doesn't get pronounced.
Right.
So
Hallelujah,
Yeah.
hallelujah.
yeah, hashashin became assassin.
yeah, okay.
I guess that makes sense.
Makes
So-
sense.
This weed, talking about the history, this weed has been with us for thousands of years. it probably is one of the first natural mind-altering substance we have been taking. He has been used for lots of medical reason and for lots of good or bad reason, whatever you want to call it. And we have been knowing that much longer than tobacco. We have been knowing it much longer than, you know, alcohol even. So, and I think, even though I know you guys just what you told me, but I think you're the generation of your parents, their influence on the society is done. Your influence starts. So meaning the next generation.
Their influence is done in a way, but they're still the people making
Look
the
at the,
rules.
yes, you look at the people in office right now. My parents would be considered young if they
Same.
were in office. So while our generation is the generation that's creating the law changes and the movements to create it, the reality is the generations that are going to make these big, you know, presidential type governments, they're still older than our parents.
But do you remember when Obama got elected and he was asked and he said, yeah, he experimented with cannabis.
Yeah, I remember. And he got criminalized. Everyone was hating on him.
No, he got
Okay.
criminalized by his opponent that
Okay.
would have been criminalized.
But
in any way.
okay, but what was his opponent? 50% of the country was still criminalizing
You
him
know,
on that.
it was a big deal that he had a tan suit. Now,
Yeah,
so
I remember
those
that.
people who blame him to wear a tan suit, it was in the news for weeks and weeks.
But
those people
Those
are
are the
going to
same
us.
people that are in office.
Yeah, I
Right
think
now.
right
So-
now, like 30 out of 50 states legalized marijuana. So it's getting there.
Yeah,
but it's
South
not
Dakota is not.
Getting faster and faster.
faster and faster. Like I said, Minnesota is implementing things faster than Oregon and California did. So it is speeding up, and our generation will be the generation that's gonna push that movement.
Yeah.
But once these people are kind of starting to retire,
But
hopefully soon.
what I see again and again is that most of those really fanatical opponent to that, to
Mhm.
cannabis, are alcoholics.
Yeah,
Have you noticed that?
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Because,
have.
yeah, I have a, again, we're in college not that long ago.
Yeah.
And I will say that there is a divide between alcohol and marijuana.
There's
Not
a
all the
huge-
time, but for the most time, if you are someone that smokes, you typically don't abuse alcohol like that. Like,
Okay.
you know, the people that binge drink on the weekends are typically people that aren't smoking
That's very true.
marijuana. You're
When-
one or the other, not always, but
Yeah, when I
It's-
was 21, I went to a party and I asked like basically like who here smokes weed? No one. They were all drinking, only drinking.
And driving right
and-
afterward.
And I
probably,
don't
yeah.
really prefer drinking. I don't enjoy it as much, you know, as other people do.
Are you admitting on camera in a
No, I'm
podcast
no,
that you're a pothead?
no, I'm not. I just said I don't enjoy drinking as much as other people do. And these people were blasted and then judging me for even asking if they smoke marijuana, but then they smoke THC. Or I mean,
or
they smoke CBD. They smoke CBD.
which is, we should clarify, is from the same plant
Yeah, it's from the same
that
plant.
marijuana is coming from.
But doesn't have lots of mind altering kind of.
No, it doesn't.
thing.
So it's like you're judging me for you're judging me for asking you if you smoke marijuana, but you smoke CBD and drink alcohol. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah,
a huge
I'm-
divide. There's definitely
There is a
huge
big divide. But like my thing is that I will always put out there is, if I'm a pretty smart person, I don't make a lot of dumb decisions. If I've made dumb decisions in my life, 99% of them, I probably was intoxicated by alcohol.
Yeah. No,
And that's just a fact.
So you're gonna say if I have made a dumb decision, I don't remember it.
Yeah, no, I'm not that dumb though. So most of the time
you
I do
don't-
remember.
make educated decisions.
It's
no, we cannot complete the history of cannabis without talking about the true injustice that has been done regarding cannabis. Do you know what I'm going to talk about? No, we remember the part that we talked about that because it was the drug of minorities.
Oh, we're
it
talking
got
about
illegal.
Oh,
jail
criminalization.
system, yeah, criminalization with
Mhm.
it.
Can
Yeah.
you imagine that there are lots of people that they went to prison for life?
Yeah.
Oh,
because
yeah.
of that? Can you even imagine?
It's hard to fathom. It's truly is hard to fathom because I know several people
Yeah.
that, are friends of mine that have went to jail for upwards of 10 years for something just by having, marijuana on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even anything more than that.
I had a friend who wasn't even driving high. She just had marijuana in her car
Exactly.
and she lost her license and then ended up dropping out of school. And like, it was just a total downfall.
And it is well noticed in all regard of our criminal justice. If you look white like you guys, you get away with that so much better
Mhm.
than if you look like a different.
Yep.
So, and that is like, it is a book I recommend to everybody. It's called Jim Crow, and then Second Jim Crow. When you read or listen, in my case, to those books, it's almost like you get sick into your stomach
So the
about how
death row
systematic. No, it's not about
No.
death row. It's about this systematic, making minorities, especially blacks, disadvantaged in any regard of our social, civil life and legal system. And mostly that is about that, many of these young kids, they just had cannabis, no hard drug and so on. They were sent for life, tens of years to prison, and especially in the South, it is in our constitution that nobody can be against the slavery. When they abolished the slavery, nobody can be forced to involuntary labor except going through the judicial system, meaning that, especially in South, they would catch these people with weed, that is, they just from around the corner. Then they would put them 10, 20 years in prison. Now they were practically slave in a different way, working for, and the prison system, they would make a business out of it. This level of injustice that has been done in the name of cannabis, it is really sickening. These young people, that there were two laws, a vagrant's law, which that if you're just standing around and not doing your work, you're vagrant, then that was against the law. Would you put in prison? Or this, this cannabis was one of the biggest producers of prisoners in the South. And then they will go to prison, they would create a legal system as business out of it, and the business would lend them to farmers, to other things, for practically working with no pay and so on. So a continuation of the slavery with abusing our legal system.
That still happens.
Hopefully not for cannabis. Hopefully not for
It
cannabis.
depends on the state. It's still federally
state,
illegal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in
I
South
don't believe
Dakota-
in the federal system has ever, enforced it anymore for smaller, like people. I think they quit enforcing it for users long time ago. Even it's federally
Here,
still
I'll just
illegal.
put this into perspective from a medical side of things, right? So for general system, so the state of Minnesota is going to be cleared for recreational marijuana on the 1st
of August.
of August. But because it is a federal illegal, it's against the law federally, it is optional for different jobs, such as, here they could say, just because it's legal, you are not allowed to smoke it because it is federally illegal still. So I know that's a big factor that I've been seeing across, the medical world is, now that it's legal, it's still not legal for medical professionals.
Yeah, right. Well, and still on the legal level, like if you drive from Colorado back to Minnesota, there's a lot of traffic stops, a
States
lot
in
of
between.
state troopers, especially in Nebraska. Nebraska, I don't know, it might have changed by now, but I know when I was 21, I drove from there to here, and Nebraska has a no tolerance law. So if you're caught with one small
Nugget.
a nug of weed, a small, not even a gram, you'll get in huge trouble, especially if you're taking it across state lines.
Well, I think
South Dakota's the same way.
I think that's going to change in the next.
It
few
will
years.
for sure.
It will change in the next
Yeah.
few years, and they're getting more and more marginalized. Those states that have these draconian laws and so on, and obviously it's not consistent because in all those states, alcohol and tobacco is legal.
Yep.
And huge.
Yeah, and they have
And
huge problem.
The way I see it, if they were able to make the tobacco age from 18 to 21 in the middle of, you know,
I remember
the
that.
life we live in,
Mhm.
they are able to do about anything.
Yeah.
Like this, then it's not an excuse anymore. Because I blinked and that happened. I didn't
Yeah.
even barely hear about that.
I was 18 in California when they did that, and you couldn't even buy a lighter unless you were 21.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
the proof is there that
Yeah.
changes such as these are able to happen without anybody making a big old scene, making,
Mhm.
you know,
I have
But
no doubt. in
it's
5
because we're
years.
doing this by year or by
State by
state
state.
by state by state. That's where we're getting the issues.
But we're
Tradition-
over half.
Yeah, traditionally in the United States, that has been proven again and again. When half of the state, when 10 to 12 states move in one direction,
Mhm.
then in the next 3 to 5 years, other half of the states will go in that direction. And once more than half of the states are in, make something legal or move in a direction like seat belt, anything,
Mhm.
then federal government jumps in and it is spread to the other state pretty fast
Yeah.
within years. So that's something that's going to happen. Now, we are again, we are not talking about the science of cannabis. We are not talking about the social effect, or this is not the sense of life. It's about the history. But I think we still should talk about actually a little about why cannabis has been in such a long use. So a little, just a nudge in the next few minutes about the science of cannabis, why this weed has been with us for thousands of years. What does cannabis do to your body, to your brain? What does it do?
Slows it down.
Not necessarily.
I
It
Ever-
does
it
not
impacts
cannabis.
everybody
It's
differently.
reception, where the receptors
There
in
are
your brain.
Lots of
So is it the
different cannabis, not
dopamine type of?
cannabis. There are lots of, like, hundreds of different versions of cannabis. And since we haven't done research on that, we don't understand that. But what you call cannabis can be vastly different kind of effect, vastly different thing, but they do something to our brain.
So are you talking about like indica versus sativa, like
Strands.
strains? Yeah.
Strains.
No, but
Strains
generally
of
they have
cannabis?
something in common.
Yeah,
There
they
is-
all have some, but
They all
We have a THC
have our
yeah.
receptor in our body,
receptors.
right?
They all help with our
What does the
receptors.
THC receptor? They have different effects, but all bind to our THC receptors. That means internally we have substance that binds something else that THC is just a substitute for that.
Mhm.
Okay, otherwise no drug would ever work. What does that THC receptor? What does it work? How does it work? What does it do for us?
Does it have to do with how we perceive our dopamine, serotonin type of levels?
How we perceive, I like that word. Did you know one of the highest place for THC receptor is the uterus?
Mm,
Now,
interesting.
do you know why
What
though?
does that mean?
Now, I have been through a few birth processes. I had to be there. I hated that. But
Don't create the babies.
Yeah. What?
but
I hate that.
but then I'm asking
Indian.
myself, who is that idiot would go through the same process again, have a
Over and
second
over and
child?
over again.
Why would be somebody
Well,
that
makes you
idiotic,
forget.
crazy
Yeah, I've
to
heard
go
it.
through that process
I
again?
get it.
Why?
I've heard that the
Because-
benefit outweighs the pain or something. Like
Well,
the pain
we're-
is so short.
Our
compared to the
bodies are
benefit.
made to create babies, to procreate, to recreate. So I mean,
And you know the mechanism that makes the woman go through that
pregnant.
shitty process
Yeah,
and
it's
experience again?
terrible.
The THC. The THC receptors, they have done those things. You rate your pain during the birth process 20, 10 is the highest, but the woman rated 20. Now, 6 months later, people forget about it, how
Mhm.
painful it was. Actively.
Hear that all the time. Even a week later. You
No,
know.
well, but when they did those studies,
Mhm.
later, the woman rated way, way lower than when they rated when it was in a process. So they actively, your body is a masterpiece to make you have more babies by
Mhm.
making you forget how painful that process was by THC. THC, not only your uterus, in many of your organs, including your brain. Act of forgetting is an active process. Like how many nurses did you see today in the hospital?
Too many.
Too many, but which one do you remember? Maybe one or two.
Couple, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
but you saw hundreds of nurses, hundreds of faces, but if you would remember all of them, you would be overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that forgetting them is not a passive process, an active process, and THC is involved in that. Any traumatic things we experience, we have mechanism to forget them. As a matter of fact, if you don't forget them, then it's when you have the post-traumatic stress syndrome. That process involves THC receptor in our brains. So it really removes the emotional response to stressors, to things that we don't, to pain and so on. And that is why it works. Medical cannabis works. It literally removes the emotional connection between the stimuli that we perceive as pain with how we react to them.
I have so many questions. We might have to have a essence
We
of
will.
science
We will
on
have an
this
essence
because
of
I have a
science.
whole bunch of questions now about the regulation process of when
We-
you supplement THC into the THC receptors and your body doesn't produce. So yeah, we won't
can
go
do
there
it.
And
now.
it's something I told my
Life show.
children. One of my children, I'm not going to name names, was telling me after a good hard work of studying, that person, not going to see he or she, love to have a little bit of a cannabis to relax. I say, you dumbass. Everything you learned that day, you will be forgetting it. Now, do you want to really remember things after you have a hard work of learning for your exam? Go get a nap, because that consolidates the
go.
memory in your lung. And whereas THC makes sure that every experience you had doesn't get translated to the long term. For something is good. If you had a stressful day and you are beaten
Mhm.
by things that you don't want to remember, that is a time you get a THC. But after a hard work day, learned for my exam, I'm having a THC. Good. You might have as well have been golfing or fishing or something else.
That's how we get in trouble though.
Yeah.
When people start to use marijuana when they've had stressful days, that's how you start to get the abuse of it. And that's where you know, like you said, yeah, that makes sense. When you want to forget something about it,
Yeah.
but
because
that's where you get the issue with normal people where they'd say, oh, you're using it to, you know, band-aid whatever's going on, just
Right.
like alcohol per se.
Yeah.
Well, because
He
unlike
goes, yeah.
unlike cigarettes,
Yeah.
you and I had this conversation. We've never smoked a cigarette because we know if you do it one time,
You could
might
be
become
addicted. You could get hooked.
And so that's the difference between marijuana or I want to refer to it as cannabis and like cigarettes or heroin.
Nicotine.
Because when you do it, you're addicted to the motion of doing it, or you're
Yeah.
addicted
The
to
habit.
the habit of doing it. You're not addicted to specifically
The
it.
substance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
Well,
3:40 almost.
but
Yeah.
we didn't even talk about like the 60s. We didn't talk about the 70s.
You want to talk about 60s and 70s? Go. What do you want to talk about?
Or we can do a part 2, but I feel like we didn't even touch the history of it. We didn't talk about
We
didn't talk about George Washington growing it. We didn't talk about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson trading nugs. Like
That's true.
there's so much we missed.
Well, George Washington as well used to sell whiskeys. Tobacco, and again, tobacco and alcohol was the main stream income for lots of people. Marijuana wasn't really, because it was growing everywhere.
Mhm.
Nobody needed to go and pay somebody
Yeah.
to do that. So, and that is one of the reasons it got illegal. Now, if you want to talk about the 50s, 60s, and 70s, those were a very special time. Now, the generation who was born, by the boomers when they came back from the war, they were a generation that they were plenty. Everything was plenty. When things are plenty, actually, there is a good study about that. It created lots of liberal. No, actually, they did a study with mice. There's we have to talk about it another time.
Okay.
This was a generation that was growing in a very liberal society.
The mice.
No, well, mice too,
No, the
but
50s.
in the 50s, because we came back,
It's like
America had everything. The economy was booming. We were on top of the world. So we, in a situation that everything is plenty, people become more liberal. So these children grew up to be in the 60s and 70s, these liberal people who would experiment. The
Mhm.
pot was just one of them.
Yeah,
It
they were
wasn't-
doing mushrooms, they were doing real acid, stuff like
I
that.
think we need to talk about the hippies as the essence of life or
Okay,
history.
we can
We
kind of
should
finish up this
definitely,
history
yeah.
and make it another
No,
episode.
but obviously, marijuana and cannabis was part of this experimental life that this new generation of people to put in place.
Mhm.
But as well, you notice that the episode went away when this generation, they weren't in their 20s and 30s anymore, meaning that we were much more restrictive in our 80s and 90s and conservative
Mhm.
than we were in 60s and
Mhm.
70s. And that is a societal thing. That is a big deal. That is the essence of life kind of conversation, essence of history about how these boomers and the Gen X and so on and so forth, how our society changed. Like, even though, and we weren't that divided then like now. Okay, we are more divided now than in the times that people would get together, 5 women and 6 men would live in one place and everybody have sex with everybody. In 60s, that was more accepted than it is now. So that is one of the things that we have become. I'm not saying, not assigning any value to that. I'm just saying that our society has become more conservative now than we were in 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And that is worth a different conversation.
Yeah, it's just the way the pendulum swings. Like if you're super liberal, next it'll be super conservative. That makes me think about if you know how high the tax is on cannabis in like Colorado and Oregon,
No, I don't.
like 26%.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And
How much is it here going to be?
it's not
Is-
it's not gonna be taxed like that. Right now it's taxed. I don't think right now it's even taxed,
It's
Okay.
but
it's probably gotta be taxed, but
Some
it's
degree.
not taxed like that.
yeah, right.
To
To
some
some
degree.
degree.
But you know why they did that? That 26% goes towards education. So it goes.
That's good.
Yeah, it
I'm
goes.
okay with that.
I know. I think that's really awesome. I
Yeah.
think maybe more states could benefit from legalizing it,
Yeah.
and taxing it high.
Well,
Well,
they already tax cigarettes and alcohol
As they
higher, don't
should.
they?
Cigarettes for sure. I don't know
Cigarettes
what
for
they
sure.
tax
Yeah.
alcohol.
So
alcohol is as well. I think in most of state taxed higher than.
As they
In-
should.
I
thought it was.
yes.
Whereas if you remember when we were in Germany,
Mhm.
we got good wine for €2 or $2, $3, $4, and these are quality wine, and it's not only the tax. See, most of the alcoholic, they don't get alcoholic on wine.
No, it's hard alcohol.
Hard liquor is most of the time, whereas most of in Europe, most of people just have a glass of wine or half a glass of wine with their meals and
Yep.
so on, and that's part of their culture. Yet the rate of alcoholism is so much lower there,
Mhm.
and the alcohol, wine, are so much cheaper there. Wine, I'm talking about wine and beer, not necessarily talking about hard liquor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But what we notice as well that that actually Cheetos were
$8.
$8 a small bag
$8
of,
a bag because it's imported.
yeah. But that as well another conversation.
Yeah.
So
Ooh.
But I think that's a good point that when
Yeah.
you stigmatize something, people go harder for it.
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, well, I think we should wrap it up.
Thanks guys for watching. This is Essence of Science. We learned
History.
a little Essence of History. We learned a little bit about marijuana, cannabis. My name is Amanda Armagast.
My name is Alyssa Haber.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence, and you're welcome for us giving the
Yes.
award assassin.
Thanks.
It's our pleasure, our Persian people's pleasure giving